Today I'm going to walk you through 10 of the worst currency collapses in human history. I've ranked them by how extreme the inflation got, starting with number 10. Number 10 is the Venezuelan Bolivar. Venezuela was once one of the wealthiest countries in South America, sitting on the world's largest proven oil reserves. But years of over-reliance on oil exports, deep structural economic imbalances, and external sanctions pushed the country's currency toward a heartbreaking collapse around 2019. The government tried to fix things by introducing a new currency called the sovereign bolivar, but that didn't address the actual problem. Production had fallen apart. At the peak of hyperinflation, Venezuela's monthly inflation rate came close to, and sometimes exceeded, 200%. That means prices were doubling roughly every 19 days. On the streets, you'd see a strange sight. Vendors weaving wallets, hats, and handicrafts out of banknotes worth thousands or even tens of thousands of bolivars, because the paper itself was worth more as a raw material than as money. Goods were so scarce that ordinary people had to cross the border into Colombia just to buy toilet paper and flour. For a regular family, buying a few kilograms of tomatoes might mean carrying an entire sack of cash. Cashiers stopped counting the bills, they just weighed them instead, to save time. People's savings evaporated within months. Many middle-class families were forced to scavenge through garbage for food, or survive on remittances sent by relatives abroad in dollars or crypto. It was one of the heaviest falls from prosperity in modern economic history. Currency number 9 is the Argentine Austral. When people think of Argentina, they usually think of football and tango. But in the late 1980s, Argentina went through a prolonged economic crisis. With massive foreign debt and fiscal deficits, the government tried multiple times to freeze prices and wages to bring inflation under control, but each attempt ended in a collapse of confidence. In July 1989, the monthly inflation rate for the Argentine Austral hit 196%, almost matching Venezuela, with prices doubling roughly every 19 days as well. That month, supermarkets became a daily battlefield. Prices were changing so fast that employees couldn't even update the shelf labels in time, so stores simply announced new prices over the loudspeaker every hour. If you hesitated for 5 minutes in front of an appliance you wanted to buy, the price had already jumped by thousands of Australs by the time you turned back. The uncertainty was so extreme that it nearly froze all commercial activity across the country. The most helpless situation was this. If there were 10 people ahead of you in the checkout line, by the time you reached the register, your items might have already gone up 10%. Shortages and localized riots spread. Stores were emptied out. Argentines learned to take every peso they earned and immediately convert it into durable goods or black market dollars. For them, this wasn't just an economic blow, it was a slow erosion of trust in the country itself. And to this day, Argentina is still locked in that same long struggle with high inflation, as if trapped in a loop it can't break out of. Number 8 is the Nicaraguan Cordoba. Nicaragua in the 1980s was devastated by a prolonged civil war and a severe international embargo, which brought domestic production nearly to a standstill. To fund a massive military and keep basic public services running, the government turned to printing money at a frantic pace. By March 1991, inflation had reached its peak. Monthly inflation hit 261%, meaning prices doubled on average every 16 days. The Cordoba lost value so fast that people completely abandoned any trust in the local currency. In Nicaraguan markets, the US dollar became the de facto currency for actual transactions, while the Cordoba was treated like some kind of oversized small change. Even beggars would refuse certain low-denomination bills. Government public services nearly collapsed because budgets were already obsolete by the time they were approved. The most ironic moment came when the government, trying to save money on printing new bills, just stamped old notes with new denominations. Some bills had 3 or 4 layers of stamps on them, with values jumping from 1 Cordoba to 10,000. This crude and brutal monetary hack didn't stop the slide, it only accelerated the collapse of trust. The first thing ordinary workers did when they received their wages was run to convert the money into rice, beans, or toilet paper, anything physical, because holding on to the cash for even 1 hour longer meant losing 10% of its value. Nicaragua's story is a reminder that political instability is the #1 killer of monetary credibility. Number 7 is the Peruvian inti. In the 1980s, Peru was drowning in economic recession and violent conflict. In 1990, to rescue an economy on the verge of collapse, the government launched what was called the Fuji Shock, a radical reform that stripped away all price subsidies. It was a necessary detox, but the immediate pain was enormous. In August 1990, Peru's monthly inflation rate reached a staggering 397%, and prices were doubling every 13 days. That means if you got paid on Monday, by the following Sunday, you could only buy half as much as the week before. The night the reform was announced, prices for gasoline, electricity, and basic staples jumped several times over, in some cases, 100-fold in a single night. People took to the streets in mass protests. Barter networks spread across the country. Peru's informal economy hit its peak. Every person became a kind of freelance trader. The word Inti in Quechua means sun god, but the name brought no light to Peru. At the peak of the collapse, the largest banknote in circulation was 5 million intis, covered in so many zeros that people had trouble counting them. A retiree's pension couldn't buy a few bars of soap. To survive, families returned to primitive barter trading clothes for potatoes, appliances for flour. Eventually, the government had no choice but to abolish the inti entirely and introduce the Novo Sol, erasing 6 zeros from the exchange rate in one stroke. It wasn't just a currency change, it was a farewell to a chaotic era. Number 6 is the Chinese gold yuan. In August 1948, the Chinese nationalist government, desperate to cover massive military expenses and fiscal shortfalls, forcibly introduced a new currency called the gold yuan. The government required ordinary citizens to hand over gold, silver, and foreign currency they had saved over years in exchange for this new paper money. But this wasn't a credible currency issuance, it was a naked seizure of private wealth. With no real reserves backing it and no limit on printing, the gold yuan collapsed almost immediately. At its worst, monthly inflation exceeded 20% and prices were doubling every 6 days. On the streets of Shanghai, people were seen carrying heavy bamboo baskets stuffed with bundles of banknotes, money that was already worth less than scrap paper, because at least scrap paper could be sold by weight. The gold yuan's purchasing power was evaporating by the hour. A buying frenzy swept through the city. A bag of rice in the morning might cost hundreds of millions of yuan. By evening, that price had doubled again. Workers no longer received wages by hand, they received them in sacks. Even stranger, because the face value of banknotes couldn't keep up with price increases, some printing factories began churning out large denomination bills with almost no security features, just simple printed lines. The cost of printing a single bill had become higher than what it could actually buy. Some shops, to protect themselves, put up signs at their doors. We do not accept gold yuan, accepting only silver dollars or US dollars instead. It was the most devastating financial tragedy in modern Chinese history, one that destroyed the last fragment of trust ordinary urban residents had in that era. Okay, and those are the first 5 entries, numbers 10 through 6 inches. The 10 worst currency collapses in human history. If you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe to the channel and check out the others. But for now, bye.